Let me begin with something uncomfortable. Tribalism in Kenya does not always manifest in loud or violent ways. Most of the time it is quiet. It is subtle. It shows up when we are choosing leaders, jobs, tenders, or even friends. Almost like a background noise we have learned to live with. Tribalism moves in Kenya like a silent cancer, something that eats us from within. Like cancer, it does not kill instantly. It weakens us slowly. And in every election cycle in Kenya, that sickness reappears. Voters suddenly remember sons of the soil, and power starts feeling like it belongs to a surname instead of a system. Here is where corruption sneaks in. When leadership becomes about tribe, competence becomes less important. Citizens get reduced to voting blocks, jobs get filtered through second names, and regions become political bargaining chips. And almost all Kenyans are participants in this. Every time we excuse theft because at least our people are eating, we turn corruption into a group project. That is how a nation ends up defending individuals instead of demanding results. This mindset stretches far beyond politics. Tribal filters quietly shape public service and tenders. Opportunities do not go to the best, they go to the closest. And slowly, inequality hardens. But there is a crack in this story. The Gen Z movement of 2024 demonstrated what happens when Kenyans step outside tribal banners and rally around shared ideals rather than shared dialects. For a moment, corruption seemed exposed as unity threatened systems built on division. No tribe is born to rule, and none is cast to be permanent outsiders. Corruption persists because we continue to feed its loyalty instead of scrutiny. And until that changes, tribalism remains the most reliable sponsor of corruption in Kenya. After 2024, something rare happened. Kenya briefly tested politics without tribal brokers or political godfathers, but just citizens demanding accountability. And then, almost quietly, the old system started creeping back. Kingpin politics thrive on a dangerous idea. The idea is that every community wants someone from their tribe to sit at the high table on their behalf, that unless our own is close to power, development will not come our way. This idea initially sounds strategic. However, it is a scam because these kingpins are not negotiating on behalf of others. They are negotiating for themselves. It is very sad seeing Kenyan communities rally behind individuals instead of ideas. They forget that all it takes is one bribe, one appointment, one tender, and suddenly an entire region is politically neutralized. This is where corruption becomes transactional. Politicians talk about our turn to eat, but that feast never includes the public. Citizens are left with crumbs while elites pocket the loaf, and somehow we keep defending them, fighting for them, and even attacking each other on their behalf. The government plays along too. Kingpins are flown in, feasted, and offered state appointments, all to secure regional loyalty. Meanwhile, hospitals rot, roads stall, and youth unemployment grows. The typical citizen never makes it to the table. And here is the most damaging part. We have normalized it. We start calling thieves our own. We rename corruption as a strategy. We accept betrayal as representation, and that is how we participate in corruption. The June 2024 movement was a sign that Kenya does not need kingpins. All it needs are systems. Corruption survives when we outsource our voices to individuals who profit from our silence. Kingpins do not exist in Kenya because they forced their way in. They exist because we invited them. Ethnic politics in Kenya did not start yesterday. It's been engineered, sharpened, and reused for decades. Since independence, ethnicity has played a decisive role, whereby voting looks less like a civic choice and more like an ethnic census. Once you see it that way, corruption becomes easier to understand, because when leaders do not win on ideas, they do not have to govern on performance. Young Kenyans are trying to disrupt this, but history weighs heavily. Colonial rule perfected the divide and rule strategy. After independence, political parties hardened those lines. Power followed ethnicity, and ethnicity learned to chase power. This reminds us how quickly ethnic politics can turn violent. In 2007, more than 1,000 people died and thousands were displaced. This did not happen because of ideology, but because politicians weaponized identity to protect power, and corruption thrives in such chaos. Ethnicity itself is not the problem. The danger begins when leaders use it for personal gain, creating divisions that shield them from accountability. When jobs, land, and state appointments follow tribal loyalty, corruption becomes invisible to its beneficiaries. Even today, government appointments reflect a deliberate effort to favor certain ethnic lines. Cabinets reflect the president's allies, and institutions mirror political alliances. Merit has become optional. Tribalism fuels corruption, ethnic clashes, and underdevelopment. And as long as citizens defend leaders based on identity, corruption will remain protected. Here is the deeper problem. Ethnicity in Kenya is not just social, it is structural. Ethnicity and political power have a symbiotic relationship. One feeds the other. Ethnicity is not about culture anymore. It's about access, status, and survival. Since no group can dominate alone, elites have created alliances that turn governance into ethnic math. Over time, this has normalized the exploitation of identity for political and economic gain, and the public bought into it, hoping that ethnic leaders will deliver, only to realize that they rarely do. Ethnicity plays out through land injustice, selective application of law, and personality cults that replace civic identity. When the rule of law weakens, people cling to tribes for protection, and corruption hides behind that fear. Even reforms struggle. The 2010 Constitution tried to neutralize ethnicity through inclusion and devolution. However, laws alone cannot change a country's political culture. Without trust, corruption adapts. What's striking is the reminder that Kenya has not always voted this way. Leaders once won on the basis of vision and national appeal. Ethnic mobilization increased when elites started competing for resources and power. Corruption in Kenya is not just about stolen money, it's about stolen agency, and ethnicity is the tool that makes the theft easier. On the surface, Kenyan politicians say the right things, especially during campaigns. They say things like, "We do not move on tribal lines and we will develop all regions." They try as much as possible to sound inclusive, but the numbers tell another story. Look at this. Kenya has 44 official tribes, yet power continues to circulate among a few tribes. Voting blocks stay predictable, and when leaders fail to deliver on their promises, they fall back on the one thing that still works, their tribal identity. That's corruption's safety net. In Kenya, leaders who fail on policy rely on ethnicity because it is what distinguishes them, not ideas, just their identity. Reforms such as devolution and constitutional thresholds were intended to promote inclusion, and they helped a bit.
Shall be the new constitution of Kenya with effect from the 27th August.
Devolution became a safety valve, easing some resentment, but ethnic loyalty still cushions failure. Young voters may show more independence. There could be growing tolerance, a sense that you have your vote in your pocket. However, ethnic voting remains a problem in Kenya because it shields leaders from consequences. When performance does not matter, corruption persists even after elections.